There is a reason the poor stay poor, and it has almost nothing to do with money. King Solomon, the wisest man who ever lived, understood this 3,000 years ago, and what he discovered is so uncomfortable that most people spend their entire lives avoiding it. It is not laziness, it is not luck, it is not even opportunity, though the world will tell you it is. Solomon looked at the poor and the rich of his kingdom, and he saw something almost no one wants to admit about themselves. The poor stay poor because of what they believe about the world before they ever earn a single coin. Before the first paycheck, before the first business, before the first investment, there is a belief, quiet and unspoken, that shapes every decision that follows it. And that belief, Solomon warned, is more dangerous than any famine or war because it convinces a man he is powerless when he is not. In the Book of Proverbs, Solomon wrote that the poor is hated even by his own neighbor, but the rich has many friends. This is not a statement of cruelty. It is a mirror held up to human nature, and it reveals something that people refuse to look at directly. Solomon was not saying poverty makes a man unworthy of love. He was saying that poverty changes how a man is perceived, and worse, it changes how a man perceives himself. When a person believes they are poor not just in circumstance, but in identity, they begin to make decisions from a place of scarcity rather than a place of vision. They stop asking, "What could I build?" and they start asking, "What can I survive?" This shift, subtle as it seems, is the root of generational poverty. It is passed down not through inheritance, but through language, through the small comments at the dinner table, through the sighs of a father who says money doesn't grow on trees, through a mother who says we could never afford that. These words plant something in a child long before that child understands what an interest rate is or what compound growth means. Solomon understood that the mind is the first inheritance, long before any house or land. In Proverbs he wrote that, "As a man thinks in his heart, so is he." This single line unravels the entire mystery of why some families climb out of poverty in one generation, while others remain trapped in it for 100 years. It is not about the money that is transferred. It is about the thinking that is transferred. A wealthy man teaches his son to see money as a tool, something that moves, something that multiplies, something that must be directed with wisdom and patience. A poor man, without meaning to, often teaches his son to see money as a threat, something that runs out, something to be feared, something that belongs to other people and rarely to us. And so the child grows up not lacking opportunity, but lacking the internal architecture to recognize opportunity even when it stands directly in front of him. This is why Solomon spent so much of his writing not on economics, but on the heart, on discipline, on patience, and on the dangers of foolishness. He wrote that the plans of the diligent lead surely to abundance, but everyone who is hasty comes only to poverty. Notice he did not say the plans of the talented, or the plans of the lucky, or the plans of the well-connected. He said the diligent. This word means the one who shows up again and again, who does not need applause to keep working, who treats small tasks with the same seriousness as large ones. The poor stay poor, Solomon warns, not because they lack diligence in general, but because they apply their diligence toward the wrong target. They work hard at surviving the week, instead of working hard at building the next 10 years. They labor to maintain their current position, instead of laboring to change their position altogether. This is the tragedy Solomon saw again and again in his kingdom. Brilliant, capable people, exhausted from work, yet no closer to freedom than they were a decade earlier, because their effort was aimed at standing still rather than moving forward. There is another layer to this wisdom that Solomon reveals with startling honesty. He wrote that he who tills his land will have plenty of bread, but he who follows worthless pursuits lacks sense. The word worthless here is important. Solomon is not condemning rest or leisure or enjoyment of life. He enjoyed wealth, wine, music, and beauty more than almost any king in history. What he condemns is distraction disguised as productivity. He saw men chasing schemes that promised fast results, gambling their limited time on ventures built on excitement rather than substance. He saw men who would spend hours discussing what they wished they had, yet would not spend 10 minutes learning a skill that could change their income. This, Solomon says plainly, lacks sense. The poor often remain poor not because the world denies them a path, but because they keep choosing the path that feels good in the moment over the path that produces results over years. Instant comfort becomes the enemy of long-term freedom, and very few people are willing to admit that this trade is happening inside their own daily choices. Solomon also warned against a very specific kind of poverty that has nothing to do with income at all, the poverty of surrounding yourself with people who reinforce your limitations. He wrote that whoever walks with the wise becomes wise, but the companion of fools suffers harm. This is perhaps the most overlooked cause of lasting poverty in the modern world. A person can have ambition, intelligence, even opportunity, and still remain poor simply because every voice around them mocks growth, questions effort, and rewards complaining rather than building. Solomon knew that human beings are shaped by their closest circle far more than by their own willpower. If a man is surrounded by people who see wealth as suspicious, who see ambition as arrogance, who see discipline as an insult to their own comfort, that man will quietly, slowly, abandon his own potential just to remain accepted by the group. This is not weakness, it is human nature. But Solomon warns that this nature, left unchecked, is exactly what keeps entire families poor for generations, long after the original hardship that caused the poverty has disappeared. But here is where Solomon's wisdom becomes something far more powerful than an accusation. He does not simply diagnose why the poor stay poor. He offers the way out, and it is remarkably simple, though not easy. He writes that the desire of the diligent is fully satisfied, meaning the exit from poverty does not begin with a windfall or a miracle, but with a change in daily behavior sustained long enough to compound. He writes that whoever gathers money little by little makes it grow, directly contradicting the modern obsession with overnight success. The truth Solomon reveals is unglamorous, consistent, unremarkable effort applied patiently over years is the actual mechanism by which poverty is broken, not clever tricks, not luck, not fantasy schemes. This is uncomfortable to hear in a world addicted to shortcuts, but it is the same principle that built every fortune that has lasted more than one generation. He also teaches something rarely discussed in modern conversations about wealth: generosity as a mechanism of abundance rather than an obstacle to it. Solomon wrote that one gives freely, yet grows all the richer while another withholds what he should give, and only suffers want. This is not superstition. Solomon observed that people who operate from generosity build networks of trust, reputation, and opportunity, while people who operate purely from scarcity often isolate themselves, becoming so protective of what little they have that they never open themselves to greater exchange. The poor stay poor in some cases, not because they give too much, but because they give nothing, expect nothing, and therefore attract nothing. What Solomon ultimately reveals is that poverty is rarely a single event. It is a repeated pattern of thought, association, and small decisions, compounding quietly across years until a person wakes up and wonders how they ended up exactly where their parents did. But he also reveals with equal clarity that the exit exists, and it does not require genius or fortune. It requires the discipline to think differently than your surroundings, to work with patience instead of urgency, to choose long-term building over short-term comfort, and to surround yourself with people who elevate rather than validate your limitations. This is not what most people think when they hear the word poverty. It is not about circumstance. It is about the invisible architecture of belief that either opens the door to abundance or quietly, permanently keeps it shut.